Chicago, March 1988. The airy Crown Theater. 4,400 people packed into velvet seats, waiting for the show of a lifetime. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., together again. The Rat Pack reunion tour. The hottest ticket in America. Frank is on stage, working the crowd, telling stories about the old days. The audience is eating it up. Then he turns to introduce Dean. "Ladies and gentlemen, my brother, my partner, the coolest man who ever lived, Dean Martin." Dean walks out. The crowd goes wild. Standing ovation. Camera flashes everywhere. But something is wrong. Dean's smile doesn't reach his eyes. His movements are slow, mechanical. He looks like a man sleepwalking through his own life. Frank notices. He throws an arm around Dean, tries to get him laughing. Dean nods, says his lines, hits his marks. But he's not there. Not really. Halfway through their duet, Dean stops singing. He turns to Frank, and in front of 4,400 people, he says 5 words that ended an era. "Frank, I want to go home." To understand the magnitude of what happened that night, you need to understand what Dean Martin had lost exactly 1 year earlier, March 21st, 1987. Dean was at home in Beverly Hills when the phone rang. On the other end was a colonel from the California Air National Guard. "Mr. Martin, I'm calling about your son, Captain Dean Paul Martin. His aircraft crashed during a training exercise this afternoon. There were no survivors. Dean Paul Martin, Dino. Dean's golden boy. His pride, his reason for living. Dino wasn't just Dean's son. He was everything Dean had hoped he would be. A tennis champion who played at Wimbledon. A musician, an actor, and a captain in the Air National Guard, flying F-4 Phantom jets. Dean Martin had spent 40 years pretending to be cool, pretending nothing bothered him, building a wall around himself that nobody could penetrate. But for Dino, he lowered the drawbridge. Dino was the only person who truly saw the man behind the tuxedo. "That's my boy," Dean would tell anyone who'd listen, pointing to a photo of Dino in his flight suit. "He flies jets. I just sing songs." On March 21st, 1987, Dino's F-4 Phantom slammed into the granite face of Mount San Gorgonio at 400 miles per hour. He was 35 years old. And when they pulled Dean Martin to his knees with that phone call, the king of cool died too. What remained was just a ghost wearing Dean Martin's face. The year after Dino's death was the darkest of Dean's life. He stopped performing, stopped returning calls, stopped leaving his house. Friends who visited said he was unrecognizable. The man who had lit up every room he entered now sat in darkness, watching old westerns on a loop, drinking, staring at photos of his son. "I walked into his house and it was like walking into a tomb," Shirley MacLaine remembered. All the curtains were drawn, the lights were off. Dean was sitting in the dark watching a video of Dino playing tennis when he was a kid. He looked at me and said, "I can't do this anymore, Shirley. I can't live in a world where my son doesn't exist." Dean's daughter Deanna tried desperately to pull her father out of his grief. She visited every day, brought him food, tried to get him outside. "It was like he died with Dino," she said. "My father's body was still here, but his soul was gone." Frank Sinatra watched his best friend disappearing, and he came up with a plan to save him. The Together Again tour was Frank's idea. A massive reunion. The Rat Pack back on stage, 29 cities. Sold-out arenas, millions of dollars. Frank thought the applause would heal Dean. He thought the music would bring him back to life. He thought if he could just get Dean on stage, the old magic would return. Frank was wrong. He didn't understand that Dean didn't want to be healed. Dean just wanted to be left alone with his grief. But Dean agreed to the tour anyway. Not because he wanted to perform, because he didn't want to let Frank down. Even broken, even hollow, Dean Martin was still loyal to his friends. The tour started in Oakland on March 13th, 1988, almost exactly 1 year after Dino's death. The timing wasn't lost on anyone. From the first night, it was clear something was wrong. Dean forgot lyrics he'd sung 1,000 times. He flicked cigarette ashes onto the stage floor with a look of utter disdain. Between songs, he stood there, staring at nothing, while Frank and Sammy scrambled to fill the silence. The old magic was gone. A backup musician named Tony DeLuca remembered. Dean was there physically, but mentally, He was somewhere else, somewhere none of us could reach. The pattern continued every night. Frank would work the crowd, energy blazing. Sammy would dance and joke, and give everything he had, and Dean would stand there like a statue, going through the motions, counting the minutes until he could go back to his hotel room. In Vancouver, Dean walked off stage mid-song to use the bathroom. He was gone for 15 minutes. Frank had to improvise an entire comedy routine to cover for him. In Seattle, Dean refused to do an encore. "I'm tired," he told the stage manager. "Tell them I left." By the time they reached Chicago on March 16, 1988, the tension was unbearable. Frank pulled Dean aside before the show. "Dean, talk to me. What's going on?" Dean looked at him with empty eyes. "Nothing's going on, Frank. I'm just tired." "Tired? You've been tired for a year. This isn't tired. This is something else." Dean didn't answer. He just turned and walked toward his dressing room. Frank grabbed his arm. "Dean, it's me. It's Frank. We've been through everything together. 30 years. You can talk to me." Dean stopped. For a moment, his mask slipped. Frank saw something underneath. Pain so deep it was bottomless. "I can't do this, Frank." "Can't do what?" "This." Dean gestured at the stage, the lights, the arena, pretending, smiling, acting like everything's fine. "Every time I'm on that stage, I think about Dino. I think about how he should be here. I think about how I'll never see him again. And I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend to be happy when my son is dead." Frank didn't know what to say. In 30 years of friendship, he'd never seen Dean like this. Dean Martin, the man who laughed at everything, the man who never let anything touch him, was breaking apart in front of his eyes. "Just get through tonight," Frank said softly. "One more show, for me. Then we'll figure it out." Dean nodded slowly. One more show. The Chicago show started like all the others. Frank opened. Sammy followed. The crowd was electric, 4,400 people screaming for the Rat Pack. Then Dean walked out. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. People were crying. Here was Dean Martin, the legend, back on stage with his brothers. Dean looked out at all those faces, all those people who loved him, all those people who expected him to be the king of cool, and he felt nothing. He sang, "Ain't That a Kick in the Head?" His voice was flat, mechanical. He sang, "That's Amore." Same thing. No joy, no spark, just a man reciting words he'd sung 10,000 times before. Frank kept throwing him setups for jokes. Dean barely responded. The audience started to notice. Whispers spread through the crowd. Something's wrong with Dean. Then came the duet. Frank and Dean, side by side, singing Guys and Dolls like they had 100 times before. Except this time, halfway through the song, Dean stopped. He just stopped. The band kept playing. Frank kept singing. But Dean was frozen, staring at something only he could see. Frank finished the verse alone, then turned to his friend. "Dean, you okay, pal?" Dean looked at Frank, and in that moment, 4,400 people saw the king of cool crumble. "Frank, I want to go home." 5 words. Quiet. Almost a whisper. But the microphone picked them up. The whole arena heard them. Frank's face went white. He tried to recover, tried to play it off as a joke. "Home? What, you don't like Chicago?" "Come on, Dean. The pizza here is—" "I want to go home." Dean set the microphone down on the stage floor. He looked at Frank one last time, and he walked off. Not toward the wings, toward the back of the stage, into the darkness, away from the lights, the crowd, the music, away from everything. Frank stood there, frozen, watching his best friend disappear. The audience was stunned. Nobody moved. Nobody knew what to do. Sammy rushed out from backstage. He grabbed Frank's arm. "What happened? Where's Dean going?" Frank didn't answer. He just stared at the empty space where Dean had been standing. "He's gone," Frank finally said. "He's really gone." Backstage was chaos. Tour managers scrambling, publicists on phones, Sammy trying to figure out what to tell the audience, and Frank Sinatra, the most powerful entertainer in the world, standing alone in a corridor, looking lost. He found Dean in his dressing room. Dean was already out of his tuxedo, putting on a regular suit. His bag was packed. "Dean, what are you doing?" "I'm going to the airport." The airport? We have a show tomorrow in Dallas. We have 26 more cities. No, you have 26 more cities. Dean picked up his bag. I'm done, Frank. Done? You can't be done. We have contracts. We have commitments. People paid money. Then give them their money back. Frank stepped in front of the door, blocking Dean's exit. I'm not letting you leave like this. Dean looked at his oldest friend. His voice was quiet but firm. Frank, move. No. Not until you tell me what's really going on. I already told you. You told me you're tired. You told me you miss Dino. But that's not enough. You don't walk off a stage in front of 4,000 people because you're tired. Dean was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice cracked. Every night I go on that stage, I die a little more. Every song I sing, every joke I tell, it's like a knife in my chest, because Dino used to watch my shows. He used to sit in the front row and laugh at my jokes. He used to come backstage after and say, "Great show, Pop," and now he's gone, and I keep looking for him in the audience. Every single night, Frank, I keep looking for my boy, and he's not there. He's never gonna be there again. Tears were streaming down Dean's face now. The mask was completely gone. I thought I could do this. I thought I could get on stage and pretend everything was okay. But I can't. I'm 70 years old, Frank. My son is dead, and I'm done pretending. Frank didn't move from the door. His own eyes were wet. Dean, I know you're hurting. I know nothing can replace Dino. But this, he gestured around them. This is your life. This is what you do. You can't just walk away. Watch me. And what about us? What about me and Sammy? We're your brothers, Dean. We need you. Dean put his hand on Frank's shoulder. You don't need me, Frank. You never needed me. You've got the world at your feet. You always have. But me, I'm empty. There's nothing left inside. And I'm not going to stand on a stage and fake it anymore. Not for money. Not for fame. Not even for you. Frank searched Dean's face, looking for something, anything that might change his mind. He didn't find it. Slowly, Frank stepped aside. If you walk out that door, Frank said, it's over. You know that, right? The tour, the Rat Pack, all of it. Dean nodded. I know. And you're okay with that? Dean picked up his bag. I'm not okay with anything, Frank. I haven't been okay since March 21st, 1987. But I'm done lying about it. He walked past Frank, stopped at the door, and turned back one last time. You're my best friend, Frank. 30 years. I love you like a brother, but I can't carry this weight anymore. I'm going home. And Dean Martin walked out of the Airy Crown Theater, into a waiting car, and out of show business forever. The aftermath was brutal. Headlines everywhere. Dean Martin quits Rat Pack tour. King of Cool walks out. Martin abandons Sinatra mid-show. The remaining 26 cities were canceled. Millions of dollars lost. The tour promoter threatened to sue. Frank went on television to explain, but even he couldn't fully explain what had happened. Dean's not well, Frank told reporters. He's dealing with personal issues. I ask everyone to respect his privacy. Privately, Frank was devastated. He called Dean every day for a week. Dean didn't answer. Finally, on the 7th day, Dean picked up. Dean, it's Frank. Silence. Dean, please talk to me. What do you want me to say, Frank? I want you to say you're okay. I want you to say you're not going to disappear. I want you to say our friendship isn't over. Dean sighed. Our friendship isn't over, Frank. But my career is. I'm done. You can't be done. You're Dean Martin. I'm a 70-year-old man who buried his son. That's what I am. Nothing else matters anymore. Frank was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I don't know. Sit in my house, watch television, wait. Wait for what? For it to be over. The final 7 years of Dean Martin's life were a study in solitude. He established a quiet routine. Every evening, he would put on a sports coat, always dressing well, out of habit and self-respect, and go to his favorite Italian restaurant, La Famiglia. He would sit at the same table. The staff knew not to disturb him. They would bring him his pasta e fagioli, his bread, his glass of wine, and they would set a place setting for the empty chair across from him. Some said he was waiting for Frank to visit. Others whispered he was waiting for a woman. But those who knew him understood. That empty chair was for Dino. He was having dinner with his son. He would sit there for hours, remembered a waiter named Marco Giovanni, eating slowly, sipping his wine. Sometimes he would talk, very quietly, to that empty chair. He was having a conversation that only he could hear. Frank visited occasionally. So did Shirley MacLaine, and a few other old friends. But Dean had retreated so far into himself that even they couldn't reach him. He watched old westerns. He played golf until his body wouldn't let him anymore. He slept. And he waited. On Christmas morning, December 25th, 1995, Dean Martin died at his home in Beverly Hills. He was 78 years old. The official cause was acute respiratory failure, caused by emphysema from decades of smoking. But everyone who knew him understood the truth. Dean Martin died of a broken heart. He'd been dying since that phone call on March 21st, 1987. When Frank Sinatra heard the news, he wept. He canceled his New Year's Eve performance. He didn't perform again for months. "I lost my brother today," Frank told a friend. "Not the brother I was born with, the brother I chose, and I never got to tell him how much he meant to me." At Dean's funeral, Shirley MacLaine delivered a eulogy. She talked about Dean's humor, his talent, his kindness, and then she said something that made everyone cry. Dean spent the last years of his life missing his son. Every single day, he carried that weight. And now, finally, he doesn't have to carry it anymore. He's with Dino again, and somewhere up there, they're laughing together. They're playing golf together. And Dean is finally at peace. That night in Chicago, March 1988, was supposed to be the beginning of a triumphant comeback. The Rat Pack together again. One more ride for the legends. Instead, it was an ending. The night Dean Martin finally admitted what everyone already knew. The King of Cool was dead. He had died on a mountain in California, alongside his son. What walked off that stage in Chicago wasn't a quitter. It wasn't a coward. It was a father who had nothing left to give. A man who had smiled through 40 years of pain and simply couldn't smile anymore. Frank Sinatra never fully recovered from that night. Neither did Sammy Davis Jr. The Rat Pack, the greatest brotherhood in entertainment history, died in that theater. But here's what most people forget. Dean Martin didn't walk off that stage because he was weak. He walked off because he was finally strong enough to stop pretending. For 40 years, he had given the world what it wanted. The jokes, the songs, the effortless charm. He had hidden his pain behind a martini glass and a crooked smile. He had played the role so well that everyone believed it. That night in Chicago, he finally said, "Enough. Enough pretending. Enough performing. Enough giving pieces of himself to strangers when the only person he wanted to see was gone forever." That's not weakness. That's the most honest thing Dean Martin ever did. Years later, Deana Martin was asked about her father's final years. She thought for a long moment before answering. "My father loved performing. He loved making people laugh. But after Dino died, it wasn't the same. The joy was gone. The music was hollow. When he walked off that stage in Chicago, he wasn't abandoning his fans. He was admitting the truth. He couldn't fake it anymore. And I think that took more courage than anything he ever did on stage." That's the Dean Martin story that should be told. Not the smooth entertainer who never let anything bother him. Not the Rat Pack legend with the perfect hair and the easy smile. The man who walked off a stage in front of 4,000 people because his heart was broken and he couldn't pretend anymore. The man who spent his final years eating dinner with an empty chair, waiting to see his son again. The man who proved that behind the coolest exterior in Hollywood was a father who loved so deeply that losing his child destroyed him. Dean Martin made millions of people laugh. He made millions of people fall in love with his voice. He made everything look effortless for 40 years. But that night in Chicago, he showed us something more important than talent or fame or charm. He showed us that it's okay to break. It's okay to admit when you can't go on. It's okay to walk away when there's nothing left inside. That's not the end of a legend. That's the beginning of the truth.